Hi everyone, welcome. I'm out here in my garden, and as you can see, my garden is still growing. I've got peppers and tomatoes that are still sort of making some progress, although with the reduced amount of sunshine now that it's late September and the cooler temperatures, I'm sure it's just a matter of time before the garden calls it quits. But for now, I'm luckily still able to enjoy it. But I'm not out here to tend to my garden. I'm out here because I've got an outdoor composting bin as well as an outdoor worm bin, and what you see on your right is what I refer to as my outdoor composting bin. This is where I place all of my excess kitchen scraps, the stuff that doesn't get picked out for the worms in my wormery. And more recently I've been getting volunteers from that outdoor compost bin to help populate my outdoor worm bin, which is what we see right here. So as we've been doing lately, I'm going to put on a glove. I'm going to go poking around within my outdoor compost bin to get volunteer worms to relocate over into my outdoor worm bin. And while we're at it, I'm not going to take food from the outdoor compost bin. I've actually gone into my stash of frozen foods, and we're going to feed them using some of that. And I've also collected some leaves that we can use as bedding. I've even bought some grit along that you see in the plastic bag there to include with their feeding. So I'm going to put on a glove and get to work. Now, when the weather is warm, I usually consider black soldier flies, or more specifically the larvae of black soldier flies, to be the primary composters in this container. But as the temperatures start to drop, the black soldier flies will eventually be kind of unable to survive, unfortunately. They require much warmer temperatures than I have in my region during the winter months. So in time, in a fairly short period of time, the black soldier flies will eventually be eliminated by the cold, and this will eventually turn into primarily a worm bin for the winter months. And then once the weather warms up again, I would have to assume that the black soldier flies will reoccupy this bin. But for now, I'm still assuming that we're going to encounter some black soldier fly larvae in here as we make our way down. But that's not who we're after. We're looking to get worms out of here. But yeah, I mean, as you can see right here, all of these little guys, these little white maggots, they are black soldier fly larvae, and they'll eventually turn a much darker color and pupate into a fly. You can even see a lot more of them all scattered around these branches, and we can see worms in here too. So we've got black soldier fly larvae, we've got worms, and there's all kinds of other creatures cruising around in this bin trying to take advantage of the food supply. But it's over here on the outer edge where I usually find the worms. And I don't go crazy trying to pick the worms out one by one. I just scoop a whole bunch of this material and bring it along for the ride when I grab the worms. I just want to sort of make sure that I have, in fact, successfully acquired a decent number of worms in each handful if I can. So I'll look for concentrations of them. But if I start getting a little bit frustrated and I don't find what I'm looking for, I might just take whatever I can find. So I'm not sure if it's the cool temperatures or what it is, but maybe I just haven't gotten to a pocket of material that really draws a large worm population. I mean, there are obviously worms everywhere, but there's no pockets of them where I can just reach in and grab a densely populated pile of material that's got lots and lots of worms in it. So the best approach here might just be to take as many as I can per handful and just try to fill up my little collection box here. So why don't we get started? I've got this little plastic container here, and I'm just going to start scooping out handfuls of material, assuming that there are worms in it. here I am getting picky again, trying to make sure I get a bunch of worms in each handful, but like I said, I've got to just make certain assumptions that if I pull out a handful of material that it does have a fair number of worms in it. And you can see worms cruising around all throughout the material. It's just that I do end up bringing a fair bit of additional stuff along for the ride, which is fine too, because in the end it'll just end up being food for the worms anyway. So let's do what I normally do, which is simply make our way around the outer perimeter, and we'll just grab a number of handfuls until we've filled up our little container here. Some handfuls will be better than others. And as you can see, there's all kinds of stuff in here, all kinds of pieces of fruit, vegetables that just didn't really do too well in the garden, might have gotten attacked by bugs or some sort of other creatures, damaged them and making them unsuitable for human consumption. The majority of what's in this container though is kitchen scraps. And I guess if it's possible, I will try to pick out large chunks of stuff that comes along for the ride. If I just happen to pick up maybe a corn cob or something really big that's easy to pull out and return to the bin, I'll do that. But I can't go too crazy and get exceedingly picky in here. There's no easy way to ensure that I'm getting lots and lots of worms. I just have to take my chances in each handful. See, here's what's left of a corn cob, it seems. They're doing a good job on it. I guess any sort of larger sticks or stems, they can all just go right back in, I suppose. And I've always treated each of these hauls of worms as also a feeding, because I would have to say that probably, 80% of what's coming over is not worms and all edible stuff by the worms, so I treat these as feedings too. I've done a couple of these at this point. I assume on each go around that I'm probably collecting a rough number of about 1,000 worms each haul. Although it's very, very difficult to know for sure how many worms are coming out each time. I just try to ballpark it, because nowadays I've been attempting to keep track of how many worms are in all my bins, and I'm even trying to do that with this outdoor worm bin at this point. Although there's really no way to know if I'm even close to the actual number of worms that occupy my outdoor worm bin. And I'm obviously bringing over black soldier fly larvae too, but like I said, they're not going to last much longer. They're going to be history once the cooler temperatures roll in. And then I'll be left with only worms, I believe. Alright, this thing's getting pretty heavy and we're almost full. Let's see if we can scoop out maybe just a little bit more from this last corner over here that we haven't checked yet. Did I say corner? That doesn't make a lot of sense for a container that's this shape, is it? Oops. Okay. That's a pretty good sized handful, taking us almost to the top at this point. It's always interesting to see how certain types of things are progressing in my bins, and it's usually these sort of things like a avocado pit, which is extremely hard when it's still fresh. But it's kind of cool seeing how it eventually softens up and becomes edible by the creatures in your compost container. I'm almost out of space here. Let's grab one more handful. Yeah, looks like we got a good number of worms on this batch right here. But we're now at the top rim of this container, perhaps even overflowing at this stage. I'm still thinking if I could find some larger items that don't really need to be moved over, I'll remove them. I'm not sure what this is. It might be like a peach pit, pretty big, hard item. So we got ourselves our most recent haul of volunteer worms out of my compost bin. Let's close things up here and get to releasing these guys in my outdoor worm bin. Over here too, you can see the footprints of some of the larger outdoor creatures that have been taking advantage of this food. So it's not just insects and worms, but in this case raccoons and probably other things as well. All right, let's head on over to the outdoor worm bin and release our worms. So out here in my worm bin, I'm covering up with a number of things. I've got a piece of plywood holding down a couple pieces of cardboard, which also hold down a piece of plastic. The plastic's job is to try to keep things nice and damp down in here for the worms. Seems to be doing a nice job. That's always a good sign when you can see a couple worms hanging out right there on the surface, enjoying the moisture. So I was trying to think of the right sequence to take here in terms of what to do in what order, and I figured releasing the worms would be the last step. I figured maybe we do a quick inspection of the material in here, see what we can see, add the food that I bought out here from inside, bury it underneath some of those leaves I bought out here too, sprinkle it with some grit. Then at the very end we'll just toss in that collection of worms that we relocated from the compost bin. As we make our way down, we start to see worms hanging out. It's been a while since we checked in here, so we probably won't see any concentration of worms anywhere. If we had a big jumble of food in one particular spot, then we would expect to find a fair number of worms hanging out right there at that spot. Since there's been no deliberate feedings of this bin recently, I'm not expecting to see a whole bunch of worms in any one spot, but it is nice to just look throughout the material and find worms hanging out pretty much everywhere. So that's kind of the whole idea here, isn't it? And now that we've done a couple of these worm releases, a couple of these transports of worms from my outdoor composting bin into this outdoor worm bin, I am starting to finally feel that the population of worms in this container is starting to reach a nice, decent level where I can really count on this bin to compost efficiently. So here's one of our little test items. I wasn't really expecting to see it here today, but this item has made its way from container to container, and for whatever reason it's now out here. It's the cork, and I don't remember how it ended up out here, but I believe the cork was originally with one of my containers in my indoor worm bins, and at some point, maybe when I was populating this container with worms from inside, the cork came along for the ride. I believe that that's how it got here. So why don't we go ahead and grab that food that I bought out here for these guys. It's a pretty good amount of stuff, and there's a whole variety of different things in here. You could see a corn cob, a mango pit, some avocados that went bad, a pear that started to go bad, some cucumber, you name it. There's all kinds of goodies in here. So we're just going to go ahead and dump it all right in. There's even a coffee filter in here to serve as just a little bit more bedding for these little guys, in addition to the leaves I'm putting in here. So I think as time goes on, and if I continue to increase the number of worms in this container, I will need to make sure that I'm also supplying it with an adequate amount of food to keep them satisfied. Yes, my glove tore when I was fiddling around in the outdoor compost bin, so this will be the last time we see these gloves. So now, before I cover up with the leaves here, I've got my grit, and I'm going to go ahead and give this feeding a nice dose of grit. Yeah, that looks like a nice amount. Save some for future feedings. And then we could toss in the leaves. Oh, this I just pulled this from the edge of the fence, and this is just some weed barrier material. Don't want to throw that in here. I don't think it's edible by the worms. But everything else in here seems to be. So I think we've got ourselves a pretty good feeding, so that maybe in the future we can more easily locate it. I'll put our little experimental item, the cork, right in the middle. And then maybe we'll try to backfill a little bit over here and level things off. So we got ourselves a pretty decent feeding in here. But what we wanted to accomplish today was the addition of more worms. So let's go ahead and bring over the worms that we collected and introduce them to their new home. Maybe we'll get a better view of how many we collected if we scatter things around here. But before I do, let me see what we got over here. We got ourselves a I'm assuming it's a black soldier fly. It appears to be that. These little guys are so calm, so docile. They'll just crawl right up onto your finger and hang out. I just didn't want to go dumping a whole bunch of stuff right on top of the little guy. So let me see if I could just relocate this little guy off to the edge so we don't end up crushing it with what we're about to throw in here. And here we go. Yep, looks like we got them all. Let's just spread things out here, give us a little better view of what happened in terms of our worm collection. It does seem like we got ourselves a fair number of worms in here. Again, I'm going to see if I can come up with a thumbnail, sort of a swag guess at how many might be in here. Doesn't seem like that many, so I'm just going to go with maybe 500. There again, like I said, it's a guess. I don't know for sure. We'll give these guys a couple minutes to get situated in their new home, and then we'll be done. Well, I was only away for a minute or two, but I don't think I see enough worms out here on the surface anymore to make it interesting enough to keep filming. But I did find a piece of plastic here, a little label from one of the pieces of fruit or vegetable that was thrown in here, so I'm removing it. Although I usually don't take that much care to try to keep the materials that go into my outdoor bins so tidy, but whatever. If I see something, it's going to come out. So this little barcode label's coming out, but now I've got, I don't know how many worms in here. I'm going to have to check my spreadsheet, because every time I've gone ahead and relocated worms from my outdoor compost bin into here, I've tried to come up with an estimate, tried to keep a record of how many they were. So, I don't know. Maybe a couple thousand at least, I would think. So that would make this into a fairly capable bin that does need to get fed pretty regularly. But like I said, in addition to the food we just added, all that stuff that came along for the ride with the worms, I'm treating as food too. And that would have to count as a very plentiful and generous feeding, so I shouldn't have to worry about this bin going hungry, at least for a few weeks. So I think I might go ahead and grab a few more leaves just to toss across the top, because I usually try to keep the plastic that's covering things up here a little bit clean if possible, so I don't want to place it right onto this gooey, mucky stuff. So I'm just going to grab a few more handfuls of leaves to throw on top of this and get this thing covered up. So I glanced over at my garden, and I thought that instead of leaves, maybe we just do a little variety for these little guys. So I collected a bunch of these grass clippings, and let's try putting this down as our top cover. Alright, so back goes the plastic covering. Oops. Looks like we even had a worm or two that came along for the ride. So I'm sure they'll be glad to be back in their bin and back in a safe, damp place. Although they're going to have to go through all that dry stuff on top to get down to where it's nice and cozy for them. But yeah, all that's left for me to do here now is to just get things covered back up and put away and cleaned up, but I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to take this as a quick opportunity before I shut off the camera to say thank you. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. And if you did, I hope you did, please remember to give me a quick thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's always really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.